Camera settings can feel overwhelming at first, but mastering them will give you full creative control. Today, we're diving deep into the exposure triangle, the relationship between ISO, aperture, and shutter speed. Once you understand how these elements work together, you'll be able to create beautifully exposed footage. Aperture refers to the size of the lens opening, which controls how much light enters your camera. It's measured in f-stops. Aperture not only affects the brightness of your image, but also impacts the depth of field. How much of your shot is in focus? Low apertures, like f1.4, is a wider aperture that lets in more light, making it ideal for low light situations or achieving a shallow depth of field. For example, at f1.4, you'll get that dreamy bokeh with the background beautifully blurred, perfect for interviews where the subject should pop against a soft background. However, at such a low aperture, the depth of field is so narrow that it becomes challenging to keep the subject's face in focus, especially if they move slightly. This requires precise manual focusing or a very reliable autofocus. A higher aperture, like f8, lets in less light but keeps more of your scene in focus. Example, for macro shots or landscape, f11 or higher ensures that all details are sharp from the foreground to the background. This is also useful in group shots or when the room itself plays a key role in the story you are telling. In interview settings, aim for an aperture between f2.8 and f4. This creates a flattering background blur while keeping the subject's face sharp. Now you can fine-tune your lighting setup by just adjusting the intensity, ensuring consistent color temperature, and evenly distributing light. Keep an eye on your histogram to monitor exposure and achieve a perfectly balanced image. If you are in a bright setting and need to keep a wide aperture for the look you want, use an ND filter to reduce the amount of light hitting your sensor. Shutter speed is all about freezing motion and natural motion blur. Shutter speed determines how long your camera sensor is exposed to light. It has a significant impact on the motion in your footage and plays a vital role in creating a natural or stylized look. The human eye perceives motion most naturally at 24 frames per second, which is why this frame rate is standard in filmmaking. To achieve this, follow the 180-degree shutter rule. Your shutter speed should be double your frame rate. For 24 frames, set your shutter speed to 1/50th. This creates natural motion blur that feels cinematic. For slow motion footage, you'll need to increase your frame rate to 60 frames per second, 120 frames per second. And to maintain the 180-degree shutter rule, adjust your shutter speed accordingly. For example, if you're shooting at 120 frames per second, set your shutter speed to 1/240th. This ensures smooth slow motion without jittery or unnatural motion. Be aware that higher frame rates reduce the amount of light reaching your sensor. So you may need to adjust your ISO or aperture, or add more light to your scene. A faster shutter speed, let's say 1/500th, freezes fast-moving subjects like sports or action scenes, since there is almost no motion blur. Slow shutter speeds like 1/30th, or here in this case 1/6, introduce motion blur, which can convey a sense of movement and speed. ISO controls your camera's sensitivity to light. The lower the ISO, the cleaner and crisper your image will be. Higher ISO values amplify light, but also introduce noise, which can degrade your footage. Use the lowest ISO possible to achieve a clean, noise-free image. This is ideal for well-lit environments like outdoor shoots, during the day, or studio setups with proper lighting. Higher ISO settings are useful in low light conditions, but be cautious, excessive noise can make your footage look grainy and unprofessional. Modern cameras handle higher ISO values better, but it's still best to use them sparingly. Now that you understand ISO, aperture, and shutter speed, let's see how they all work together. As an example, we use filming an interview. You start by locking your shutter speed at 1/50th for 24 frames. This ensures natural motion blur. Set your ISO as low as possible, typically 100 or 200, to maintain a clean image. Adjust your aperture to control the look of your shoot. If you want a lot of background blur, use a wide aperture like f1.4 or f2.8. If you need more of the scene in focus, such as when the room itself is important, increase your aperture to f5.6 or even higher. If your subject is overexposed and you don't want to close your aperture further, adjust your lighting using an ND filter to reduce the light entering the lens without changing your settings. This approach keeps your creative vision intact while maintaining proper exposure as well. Even if you balance the triangle perfectly during filming, post-production tools can enhance your footage further. Use editing software to adjust the exposure, fine-tune the highlights, shadows and midtones for a polished look. Check all of your scopes, rely on histograms or waveform monitors to maintain consistent exposure across clips. Clean up the noise. If higher ISO introduced noise, consider using noise reduction tools to smooth them out. When it comes to photography, the same three elements, ISO, aperture and shutter speed, are just as important. But you often have more control compared to videography. Since you're capturing still moments, you can adjust your settings more precisely for each shot to achieve the desired exposure and creative look. Unlike video, where shutter speed is tied to frame rate, in photography, you have the flexibility to adjust shutter speed based on your subject and focal length. One golden rule: always keep your shutter speed at least double your focal length to avoid motion blur caused by the camera shake. For example, if you're shooting with a 50mm lens, use a minimum shutter speed of at least 1/100. I would generally recommend that 1/200 is a good baseline to freeze subtle movement, and for action shots such as sports or wildlife, I would aim for at least 1/500 or higher to capture fast motion without motion blur. Understanding and mastering the exposure triangle, ISO, aperture and shutter speed gives you full control over your camera and unlocks endless creative possibilities. Whether you're shooting cinematic, slow motion, dramatic interviews or macro shots, balancing these three settings will elevate your filmmaking. If this guide helped you, give the video a thumbs up and subscribe for more tutorials. Do you have questions or any topics you'd like us to address? Comment them down in the comment section, and we'll see you in the next video.